Dear students, let us continue the law class. Today we will discuss types of contracts. We have seen that an agreement enforceable by law is a contract. That a proposal, when accepted, becomes a promise, and a set of promises forming the consideration for each other is a contract, is an agreement, and agreement with enforceability is contract. These things we have already discussed. Now, let us see the classification of contracts. Contracts are classified on the basis of its validity, its formation, and its performance. Let us discuss one by one. First one, classification of contract on the basis of its validity. Under this head, contracts are classified into valid contract, void contract, voidable contract, illegal contract, and unenforceable contract. Valid contract means a binding and enforceable contract containing all the essential elements of a contract. The essential elements of a valid contract are contained in section 10 of the Act that we will discuss separately. If all the essential elements are contained in a contract, it is called a valid contract. Now, a void contract. Void means invalid, ineffectual, unenforceable, etc. Void contract is normally unenforceable. A contract which ceases to be enforceable by law becomes void when it ceases to be enforceable. That is what is the definition given to a void contract in the Contract Act. A contract may be valid when it was entered into and may become unenforceable due to subsequent circumstances. We will say vitiating circumstances, want of free consent, undue influence, etc. So that we will see later. But when a contract, when it becomes void, we will say it is not a contract at all. See, let us take an example. X entered into a contract with Y to purchase the entire yield of a paddy cultivation, which is almost ripe for harvest. But just before the day of its harvesting, the entire paddy was destroyed by wild animal attack. Now, the supply of paddy as promised in the agreement between X and Y becomes impossible, and therefore the contract becomes void. Because the subject matter has been destroyed. In another example, we will say A agrees to supply a certain quantity of sugar to B. But before the supply, the entire factory and its premises were destroyed by fire, making it impossible for the supply of sugar by A to B as promised. The contract becomes void. It cannot be enforced. When a contract becomes unenforceable, due to such impossibility, then you can say, even though at the time when the contract was entered into, it was a valid contract, due to subsequent circumstances, it becomes a void or invalid contract which become unenforceable. Now, there is another category of contract called voidable contract. A voidable contract is that contract which can be avoided later. But a voidable contract may either be affirmed or rejected. But unless and until it is set aside at the instance of the aggrieved party, the contract is valid. We can say an agreement which is enforceable by law at the option of one or more parties thereto, and not at the option of the other parties. It is called a voidable contract. If that contract is not cancelled by the aggrieved party, having the option to resign it within a reasonable time, the contract becomes valid. The difference between a void contract and a voidable contract can be summarized as follows. In the case of a void contract, a contract becomes void when it ceases to be enforceable. Ceases to be enforceable, cannot be enforced, that's it. That is the case of a void contract. Until that time, the time up to which it becomes unenforceable or ceases to be enforceable, it was valid. But the moment when it became unenforceable or ceases to be enforceable, the contract becomes void. But in the case of a voidable contract, the contract may be still valid, but at the option of one of the parties to the contract, not at the option of the other party. It can be cancelled or avoided. Thus, in the case of a voidable contract, a valid contract may be avoided. And in the case of a void contract, it becomes void due to change in law or due to change in circumstances. We have already seen in the above two examples. Due to change in circumstances, the contract has become void. Now, in the case of voidable contract, it becomes voidable if consent of the party was not free. One such example. See, there will be two parties to the contract. One party making the proposal, the other party accepting it. When the other party accepts it, he is consenting the act proposed by the offerer. That consent, if that consent is obtained after threatening him, his consent is not free. And in such cases, he can avoid the contract. Again, in the case of void contract, when a contract becomes void, it does not grant any right to the contracting parties. In the case of voidable contract, the party whose consent was not free can avoid the contract. Now, the another category is illegal contract. The contract of the law forbids to be made, prohibits to be made. The courts will not entertain such contract. And not only that contract, any subcontract, that is the collateral contract, resulting from an illegal contract, also the courts will not entertain. And illegal agreements are void, but all void agreements are not necessarily illegal. Once you find that it is an illegal agreement is automatically void. That does not mean that all void agreements are illegal. There may be circumstances when a contract becomes void due to other circumstances, as we have already discussed. For example, A agrees to pay 5 lakhs to B if he attacks and injures C. Here it is a contract to commit a crime. It is illegal. Now, X agrees with Y to purchase brown sugar. The contract is illegal. But when the contracts are for doing a crime or an act prohibited by the government, such acts are illegal, and contracts to do such acts are called illegal contracts. The difference between void agreement and illegal agreements are also to be noted. In the case of void agreement, it is not necessary that the agreement should be illegal. But in the case of illegal agreement, that agreement is illegal from the very beginning, or we can say it is illegal ab initio. Void ab initio, it is what is called. But a void agreement may be valid at the initial stage, but becomes void later due to certain vitiating circumstances. A void agreements, it is not forbidden law, it is not prohibited by law, but illegal agreements are forbidden by law. In the case of void agreement, no punishment is prescribed, but in the case of illegal agreement, the act being criminal, punishments are prescribed, is liable for punishment. In the case of void agreements, the collateral agreements are valid, but in the case of illegal agreement, the collateral or subcontracts are also illegal. These differences have to be borne in mind when we discuss about void agreement and illegal agreement. Then there is another type of contract called the unenforceable contract. Unenforceability, we have already discussed about illegal and void contract. There also the contract becomes unenforceable. Here, due to circumstances other than that is stated under void agreements and illegal agreements, in the case of unenforceable contract, due to some other reasons or technical reason, in some cases the contract should be expressed, that should be in writing or by words. If it is not in that mode, that contract is not enforceable. When you take a loan from a bank, it should be an express contract. An agreement should be in writing. Both the parties have to sign the agreement. If it is not expressed in writing, the contract is unenforceable due to technical reasons. Now, validity on the basis of formation. On the basis of formation of a contract, a contract may be valid or void. Express contract. We are just before discussed about unenforceable contract. There also we have discussed express contract. Section 9 of the Indian Contract Act says, if the proposal or acceptance of any promise is in words or in writing, it is said to be express. In words means you're making a contract over phone, not in writing, by words only. It is an express contract. In another case, you are reducing it into writing. The terms and conditions are in writing. It is also an express contract. If both the proposal and the acceptance are made over phone or by post, you can say, it is an express contract. In writing or by words, express contract. Implied contract, section 9 itself says, when the proposal or acceptance is made otherwise than in words, the promise is said to be implied. Suppose in the railway station, when you come to the railway station, a porter comes to you and take your luggage without asking, and you allow him to do so. He follows you and the luggage is placed in your seat or wherever you want to keep it. And when the porter, before he leaves, he may wait for his fees. Then you cannot say, I have not asked you to take my luggage. I thought it is done freely. There is no contract between us. You cannot say that. Allowing the porter to take to carry the luggage itself is an implied contract. So it is not by words. It is not an express contract. It is what is called an implied contract. Tacit contract is very simple. You go to the ATM, using your card, you withdraw money. Later you cannot say, I have not taken money, so there has been no contract between you and us. It is a silent contract. Tacit contract means silent contract. You silently accept the terms and conditions of the bank. If you withdraw money from the ATM, from your account, that much amount will be reduced and the reduced balance will be available in your account. You cannot say that. You cannot reduce I have not withdrawn money from you coming to the bank. That you cannot say. So it is called a tacit contract or a silent contract. Then there are certain contracts called quasi-contract. Semi-contract, that is what is called. Actually, when there is no real contract, but the law imposes certain rights and obligations on the parties, it resembles a contract in certain circumstances by operation of law. For example, you were walking along the road. You have seen a purse on the roadside. You have put it, picked up and examined. It is full of currency notes. What will you do? Will you keep it with you? Or give it to somebody else? Or to inform the police? Or try to find out the owner? and entrust a pass to him. These are all the options available with you. But you have a responsibility. When you find a lost goods, you have to entrust it to the true owner, or at least give it to the police station for giving it to finding out and giving it to the owner. So here there is no real contract. There is no written contract or oral contract between the parties. Here, the moment you take the purse from the roadside, an obligation by operation of law comes to you, making it your responsibility to find out the true owner of the purse and give it to him. And in such cases, we can say there is a contract, and it is called a quasi-contract. There are many other examples. Claim for necessary supplied to minors and unsound persons. Their property is liable. Another kind of a contract is e-contract. Nowadays, people create networks which are linked to other networks, and contracts are made through emails and other electronic data interchange, EDI we say. The EDI therefore helps carrying on business transactions and entering contracts regarding business transactions. Such contracts are called e-contract, or even mouse click contract, or even cyber contract. For example, A sends a proposal to B through an email, and B accepts it through email. It's an e-contract. So, e-contracts are also nowadays entered into between people. Now, on the basis of the performance of the contracts are classified into, number one, executed contract, executory contract, executed and executory contract. Executed contract, as the very name indicates, both the parties to the contract have already executed their promises. Nothing is pending. If both the parties to the contract have already performed their promises, such contracts are called executed contracts. When both the parties to a contract have performed their part, it is called executed contract. Their part is already discharged. You go to a grocery shop, and ask for certain grocery items. The grocer packs those things and give it to you, and you pay the price for that. Here, both the grocer as well as you have performed your part. The grocer has given you the goods required, and you have paid for the price. So here, the promises on the part of both have already been completed, and therefore you can say it is an executed contract. Whereas in the case of executory contract, it means the reciprocal promises on the part of both the parties to the contract are yet to be performed or completed. In other words, the performance from both sides is pending to be executed. Such contracts are called executory contract. Suppose A enters into a contract with a building contractor to construct a residential building. The contractor agrees to commence the work after 1 month, and you agree to pay advance at that time. Here, the work is not commenced, the advance is not given, the promises on the part of the contractor and yourself are not carried out. It is to be carried out in future only. Such contracts are called executory contract. The promises will be executed in future only. But an executory contract may be unilateral or bilateral. Unilateral means one-sided. Bilateral means two-sided. Unilateral in the sense, if you take the above example, advance has been given to the contractor for construction of the building, and he has promised to start construction on a particular date. Here, the advance promised has already been given by one party. The work promised is yet to be started. Therefore, one party has already performed his part, the other party's performance is pending. So it is the performance pending is one-sided, and it is what is called a unilateral contract. Whereas, suppose the work has not been commenced, advance also is not given, both has to be done only in future. In such circumstances, both the promises are to be performed in future only, and therefore that contract is called a bilateral contract. That is where both the parties are to perform their parts in future only. It is called a bilateral contract. Now another type of contract is contingent contract. Contingent means depending on certain circumstances. Casual or accidental, etc. That is contingent. Contingent upon conditional. You can in other ways say it is conditional. The contract is depending on the possibility of happening or not happening something. For example, A agrees with B that if it rains tomorrow, A will pay B 500 rupees, and vice versa. If it is not raining, B will pay 500 to A. So the contract is dependent on another event. It is what is called a collateral event. Only if that event takes place, the contract will be enforceable. only tomorrow if it rains, A has to pay 500 to B, or if there is no rain tomorrow, B has to pay. So whether the payment is based on whether it is raining or not the next day. So it is a contingency. It's happening. It may or may not happen. Such contracts are called contingent contract. Now wagering contract. Wagering, it is a wagger, W-A-G-E-R, wagger. It is simply speculation, bet. Contract to pay money on the happening or not happening of a particular event to each other respectively. For example, say there is a cricket match between India and Australia. There is a bet between X and Y that if India wins, X will pay certain amount to Y, and if Australia wins, Y will pay to X. It is only a bet depending upon the result of a future event. If it is in the nature of a bet, that is what is called a wager. It is called a wagering contract. So we have already seen the different kinds of contracts, and it has been classified on the basis of validity, formation and performance. We have already seen there are 5 kinds of contracts: valid contract, void contract, voidable contract, illegal contract and unenforceable contract. And on the basis of its formation, it may be express, implied, tacit or quasi-contract or e-contract. And on the basis of performance, it may be executed or executory, or then it may be a contingent contract or a wagering contract. So it is the types of contract we have discussed, and all about types of contract we have now discussed. We will take another class on a different subject in the next class. Okay, thank you.